The session is Fair Assessments, Ensuring Equity and Excellence in Education. The panelists are Saima Anwer, Andrew Coombe, Ghulam Mallah, and Tariq Banuri. The moderator for the session is Chaudhary Faisal Mushtaq. A brief intro about the moderator. Dr. Faisal Mushtaq is a distinguished academician, education reformer, and social entrepreneur, and has made an indelible mark on Pakistan's education and social welfare landscape. He is currently the founder and CEO of Roots Millennium Education Group Pakistan and the president and founder trustee of the Millennium Institute of Technology Entrepreneurship, MITE. Over to you, Faisal Saab.
Thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Assalamu alaikum, and a very good afternoon to all the delegates of the Literature Festival. So my name is Faisal Mushtaq, and I shall be the moderator for the session. And we shall be talking about equity, fairness, and excellence in the assessment and in the exam regimes as well. So let me make a brief introduction to a very esteemed and a very diverse panel. And sitting on my right is Dr. Tariq Banuri. Dr. Banuri has served as the chairperson of the Higher Education Commission of Pakistan. And Sir has an eminent and an elaborate contribution to the higher education, and both in terms of research and also in terms of policy. And we have seen great dividends of your policy, sir, and of your practices and your larger contribution to state and society and the higher education systems, policies, and practices in particular. With Dr. Tariq Banuri, further on right is Ms. Saima Anwer. She is from the British High Commission, from the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office. She is the Senior Education Advisor, and she possesses expertise in international relations, education systems, policies, analysis, strategy, and capacity building, with a lot of focus on curriculum development, training, and capacity building. Next we have is Andrew Coombe. Andrew is the Managing Director of the Oxford AQA Exam Board. Oxford AQA is a culmination of Oxford University Press, which is a department of University of Oxford, and the famous AQA Exam Board. So a very warm welcome to you, Andrew. You bring together rich experience, leadership, and practice. And we are all aware that Oxford AQA is one of the most popular GCSEs and A-level exam board, where you have 62% of the market share in the UK. So prior to Oxford, Andrew led the global teams at the Cambridge Assessment. He's a passionate advocate and champion for education, and he's worked internationally during his career, and also is a graduate of University of both Oxford and Cambridge. That's a unique honor. So did you win the race? Did you win? So next is Mr. Mallah, and Sir Mallah is currently the chairperson of the IBCC, or it is now a commission, sir, as you said, Inter-Board Committee of Chairmen. Now it is called Inter-Board Commission, if I'm rightly pronouncing it. Dr. Mallah he has had reforms and practices to the exams and the qualification boards across Pakistan, and particularly in terms of policy and the regime and the provisions that how IBCC is offering service to the students. And your rich contributions, sir, truly reflect how the organization has transformed itself. So, setting tone for this panel, let me first begin that, as a great educationist once said, that the real purpose of education is to replace an empty mind with an open mind. And speaking about openness, we talk about equity, we talk about inclusion, we talk about diversity, and we talk about fairness and yet excellence. And I've always said, or to all the people that I come across, and I always said that in today's time and age, the only thing which is constant, it is change itself. And the only thing which is certain, it is uncertainty. So in such times of uncertainty and constant change, are we preparing our students to be future ready? Do they have the right subject knowledge, pedagogical skills, assessment-centric practices, and most importantly, a fair, just, and an equitable opportunity through the qualification and the exam boards globally? So, as a teaching and learning enthusiast and a practitioner, I would say that fairness and equity vis-a-vis education. So there is a thin line between the rigor and also in terms of the approach that we adopt. Also, subjects like, do we really need to assess students in their mother language or the countries which are having English as a secondary language? So how do we deal with equity when we are dealing with the national educational paradigm? And clearly in Pakistan, we have seen that we are an amalgamation of the public, private, community, donor, and the madrasa education system. So the diversity of provision across Pakistan, it is beyond the scope of public. A recent study by the Harvard Business Review, it called upon that the private and the education in Pakistan is no more an urban elite phenomena, it is a rural urban phenomena. So there are schools for different income groups all across the country. Community schools, development sector schools, non-profit schools, missionary schools, madrasa education system, and the public-private partnerships, and one of the government-sponsored education provisions. Altogether, they create a rich sense of diversity within Pakistan. So speaking about assessments, and then speaking about exams, and then speaking about fairness. So I would like to open the dialogue and the discussion. And we would also like to learn from each one of you. So if I may ask you, Dr. Tariq Banuri, sir, that the question that I may pose to you is that having a fair and equitable education system, is it linked to social justice? From your perspective, where do we stand in providing the social justice to the Pakistani students? Can Oxford AQA provide this opportunity? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Faisal Sahab. First of all, for inviting me to the panel, and second, for the very generous introduction that you gave. I would like to hear more from the Oxford AQA and Mr. Coombe in particular about the nature of the program. But let me say a few words about the tension between fairness and excellence. There's an old study by Sam Bowles and Herb Gintis from way back when I was a grad student, 1980s, schooling in capitalist America. And one of the things they tried to show was that how the education system was actually very subtly advancing students who come from more affluent backgrounds. That means, you know, you have kind of the idea of a merit-based society, and then merit is connected to schooling, and schooling is connected to income, because lots of students cannot get access. Now, we do think, I mean, if that's a problem in the US, you can imagine it's a much bigger problem in Pakistan. So we do want to have a system which enables people from modest backgrounds to benefit not only from the knowledge and to use it to advance in the future. There are a number of strategies. Currently in Pakistan, hardly any of those strategies are being deployed. They're being deployed on the margin by some individual institutions, but across the board, it's very, very sparse. So we do need to introduce those strategies. That is one question, and we can talk about that if we want. But the second question is whether testing is the appropriate mechanism to use in terms of advancing this agenda. And here I must admit to being a bit of a skeptic. My problem is this. I have sat on admissions board, I've sat on selection committees. When I look at somebody's credentials, and particularly their test results, what I want to get is a certain degree of confidence that this credentialing, this information that I'm getting, is a good predictor of the future success of this person. Right? So if you have a good student, the credential should actually tell me that this is a good student and he or she is likely to be successful in the future. That's what I want to know. What we are getting over here is a large number of different testing systems which are not comparable, which within themselves are rather variable. And then, they also have different types of methodologies which make it very difficult to assess. So the question for me really is, how do you make a system which is so credible that I can look at it and try to understand, what this tells me about the person? Introducing a lot of other variables in it, to my mind, is a bit of a problem. And I do hope that Mr. Coombe is going to address this. So that is one question that we need to take in mind, take up. The second question also is that, so this is what is called the market signaling problem, right? So when you have a degree, the market needs to know, what does this degree mean, right? If you have a certain grade in your SATs or in your Cambridge A-levels or in your FSC or FA exams, the market needs to know, the employer, the admissions officer needs to know, is this person any good? And if it doesn't tell us those things, then it has failed. So that's really a question. That's the market signaling question. But there's also a slightly different question, which is that we also want to use the testing system as a kind of an incentive for people that this is what you need to learn. So if we actually go out and tell people, as some people have been doing in this country, that it doesn't matter, all you need to do is to learn a little bit of math and a little bit of technology, and you can become a good automaton, I'm sorry, we have failed this country. That's not the kind of people that we want to have. Recently, I read in the newspaper, Sam Bankman-Fried, the now convicted head of the crypto scandal, he said that basically books are no use. He's an MIT graduate. Well, maybe MIT is a technical school, so you can say that. But he's an MIT graduate. He says books are no use. Now, the question is, if you don't read the books, and if a testing system doesn't tell me something about the books, I really don't know whether this person is going to perform well in the environment in which we are living. And I also don't know whether this person is going to be a good citizen, a good decision maker, a good politician or a bureaucrat or a businessman. All of those things are very important. And books are the way in which we try to bring those people up. So actually separating sort of quote-unquote technical skills from larger social and humanities skills, I feel is a little bit of a problem. And maybe that is also a question that the panel can address. Right?
Thank you. Thank you, sir, very much. Picking up the thread, difference versus diversity, and you, Ms. Anwer, you have rich experience in educational policy systems. And so what do you think is the fair line between academic rigor and having fairness within that rigor? So in terms of policy, how would you define, or what would you suggest that going forward, how do we deal with the challenge when we want our students to be future ready, and when we say we want them to have skills?
Thank you so much. Picking up on the points that my previous panelists just made, I just want to say from where I come from, and we basically work quite a lot on large systems reform with the government in basic education, which is 12 years of education, so not necessarily higher education. In that context, we feel that having quality assessment can really be a strategic driver of systems reform. I think all of you, as you know, from your time as students, as parents of children who are now school going, will have your own experiences with assessment and examination systems. And what I'm going to talk about, if it sounds a little bit impersonal, you can just, a system can look very impersonal, so you can just apply it to a school as well. A school is also a system. At the systems level, I think there are several challenges, but I'll just focus on three main challenges that we often grapple with. The first one is that assessment should be a tool to inform learning through feedback loops. And often this is not the case. So by that I mean assessment, a good assessment that can have an impact on systems needs to inform teaching and the curriculum and the textbooks. And that we're not seeing is happening, currently. Often the ministries and government departments responsible for all these different things work in silos. My second point is, which you've really made already very powerfully, is this comparability. And we face that challenge a lot in Pakistan when we look across provinces. At the boards of intermediate and secondary level, we have something like 25 boards, more than half a dozen boards in at least 3 out of 4 provinces in the country. So what does that tell us about, what children are really learning and how can we compare that? And the third point that I wanted to make is that what we're really struggling with in Pakistan is the expertise that is needed to develop high quality assessments and analyze this data and make it available for policymakers. And that's perhaps an area where the private sector could come in and help partner with the government in order to reduce our reliance on very short-term technical assistance. I quickly want to make a point on equity and inclusion, because we know that the large majority of children in Pakistan, whether they go into public schools or to private schools, are not learning much. There's only a very small group of children going to some of the elite private schools that are learning at levels that are comparable to other countries. And to give you an example, the first time that Pakistan participated in an international standardized assessment, TIMSS, the Trends in International Mathematics and Science Study, I believe it's called, in 2020, which assesses grade 4 ability of children in Pakistan in math and science to other countries. We ranked second from the bottom. So I think clearly there's something that is missing. To me, this is both a learning crisis, but also an equity crisis. Usually, when we talk about drivers of equity, we talk about wealth, we talk about location, where are these children, we talk about gender, we talk about language, ethnicity. I would add another dimension, and that is, learning. And especially when this learning is dependent on the kind of schooling that the children are getting or not getting. What does Pakistan need to do in this context? Really, when the target group we're talking about is so large and resources are so scarce. Some really difficult decisions need to be made on where resources should be focused. And I would say, as you would say, for a good school, for a good system to flourish, we really need to focus on the poorest performing schools and the poorest performing students, because that has the potential to really, improve the system overall, to improve learning for all children, and reduce inequity and inequality. And lastly, I want to, there are lots of other things I want to stop, but these kinds of ambitious system-wide reforms really need a lot of political commitment and will. In the countries where we see, that have really made a difference, if I were to point at one thing, it would be that political will. And when we look for good examples of sustained system-wide reform, it's very hard to find those, but two immediately come to mind. One is, the Brazilian state of Ceará, which, despite being the poorest state in the country, achieved, this transformative improvement in learning and is at the top of the, high-performing states in the country of Brazil. And that's basically, down to the political will. Another example that's often quoted is Vietnam, despite being a lower middle income country, ranks quite high on these international standardized assessments. And from our work here, just my last reflection, very last reflection, we really need to look at the kinds of assessments that will motivate the sort of broad engagement that we need from a wide variety of stakeholders. So one example was when we did a constituency level assessment of political constituencies and then shared that with politicians. That actually did drive them at least to make certain commitments towards improving learning. And similarly, the regional and international assessments that countries often take, we've seen that in other countries these have led to really ambitious education reforms at the highest political levels. So just a few thoughts to leave there with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Some very important points that you have raised. So moving on, Andrew. First of all, a very warm welcome to Pakistan. And as I gather, this is your second or third visit to Pakistan?
I think it's even more than that. I always love coming back to Pakistan. But, it's
so
great.
if I may ask
Of
you,
course.
if you allow. So just wanted to welcome you. But now picking up the dialogue and a discussion, as a teaching and learning practitioner, I say to members of our community that are we teaching the 21st century students through the 20th century teachers on a 19th century curriculum framework using an 18th century calendar? And in education, they say, teaching stops when you enter the classroom. Learning begins after you enter the classroom. Now, as you must have realized, looking at our traffic regime, we are a society in rush. Similarly, assessments is a dividend of curriculum. Assessment is a dividend of syllabus. And I also say to my community that here in Pakistan, across the board, we are rushing the curriculum. And so I say that curriculum, we rush it, it becomes hurriculum, and then it becomes variculum. So, so very regimented 20th century factory modeled non-scientific, inhumane assessments regime, internationally, nationally, I see. How do you think Oxford AQA would be able to be a game changer here in Pakistan?
Okay, well, I will certainly attempt to to tell you how we do things and how they might be a little bit different from what you've seen before. I think ultimately we're an assessment organisation, so we're here to make sure that our assessments are high quality, and there are three things principally that you need to do to make a high quality assessment. You need to make it valid, you need to make it reliable, and you need to make it comparable. And in terms of validity, that means that what you need to assess is what is in the specification or the syllabus and nothing else. So we take a lot of care to make sure that if we have, let's take an example, a physics exam, that we are assessing the skills and the requirements of the syllabus in physics, and we are not testing other things that might be outside, such as context or language. We use something called the Oxford 3000, which is the 3,000 most commonly used words in the Oxford English Dictionary. And all our assessments are evaluated against the Oxford 3000, so that there is no language that is used that will surprise students and would cause unfairness, except perhaps technical terms, which will be in the syllabus anyway. So that's validity. On reliability, we go to great lengths to make sure that our assessments are carefully constructed so that they test the right skills, they test the assessment objectives, which are also listed in the syllabus, and that the marking and the grading and the awarding is rigorous. And just briefly on comparability, what we mean by comparability, we need to make sure that the grades that are awarded are comparable from one exam series to the next, and indeed from 1 year to the next, and to some extent from one exam board to the next. Obviously, we're limited by the system that we operate in. We align our qualifications to the system that is used in England, and so that means that the grade set is the same as is used in England. And it means you can be very confident that, that our grades are exactly at the same standard as those used in England. If you don't keep up with the changes that happen in the board or the exam system that you're trying to align to, then that's much more difficult to do. But just touching on the points about what are we assessing and what are the skills for the future, we are very conscious also that we want to develop skills which will be of use beyond the exam. I know that many people are very concerned about getting the top grades and the grades that you get in exams. And of course, those things will open doors and enable you to move from one stage to the next. But, and this may sound strange coming from an exam board, you shouldn't worry too much about the grades. What's more important is that you are developing in your students, you're developing skills which can be used in the future. And so by that I mean skills of teamwork, of collaboration, an awareness of what's going on globally, and also very important is critical thinking. And you know, one of the things that we are really keen to develop in our assessments as well is this ability for students to look at something and be critical of it. And just to give an example of how that might work, if you, we talk sometimes in assessment terms about predictability, and there's good predictability and bad predictability, if you like. On the good side, you want your students to be able to know what they're being tested on. So they need to study the right aspects of the curriculum. They need to know what the assessment objectives are. But if you get to the stage where they are able to predict the questions that are going to come up, and they only study those subjects because they think they've cracked the code, that is bad. That is not going to help anyone. And what it tends to lead to is rote learning and people regurgitating answers that they have prepared, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they've understood the syllabus or the system. And I know that that's something that we need to guard against, both here in Pakistan but in other countries as well. And I was very much taken with this, what Victoria Schofield said yesterday about the importance of enabling students to question what they are reading, to question what they're told, not to believe everything that they're told. And we very much encourage that in the specifications and the syllabuses that we use. I've probably talked enough for the moment, so I'll pause there.
Thank you very much. Dr. Ghulam Ali Mallah Sahab. Sir, the question is that, you know, you being the chairperson of the commission and the chief regulator for the K-12 exam regime in Pakistan, the world, internationally, the world is moving from exams to empathy. People are moving from assessments to assignments. They're moving towards portfolios. They're moving towards coursework. Something that Dr. Tariq Banuri is very fond of, sir. You have really restructured the educational ecosystem. But now when we look at the diversity of our own national exam boards, we have some good examples within Pakistan. I mean, Federal Board is a good example. Aga Khan University Board is a good example. So how, you know, when it comes, the word exam equals fair and not F-A-I-R, F-E-A-R. So as the chairperson, how do you think that we should be able to bring a culture where we are not just learning for grading? Because, Andrew, you mentioned grades do not matter, but the entire higher education system and the university system, they are based on those entry points. You take out those entry points, there is no free lunch. So the question to you as Honorable Chairperson is, can we have more diversity, more choice? You know, the things that we used to have, metric tech, FSC tech, and a different exam regime and a new thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, Faisal. So as you said that the teaching and learning cannot happen with just one, fit for all. We have various pedagogical and assessment techniques which we are using at various examination boards, but there is need of the reforms over there. What difficulties we are facing in Pakistan or examination boards we are facing? We don't have flexible or up to the mark education system. This is not only the examination system. When we talk about the examination, this is the part of the entire education system, where curriculum is there, where teacher is there, and finally assessment is there. We have to make it flexible, we have to make it inclusive, and more importantly, we have to make it responsive to the need of or experience of every student. Then we can say that we have given an excellent education system to the nation. But we all are working. The other issue that Andrew mentioned, that the entire education system is based on the rote learning in Pakistan. What we are doing, what teacher is doing, teacher is just offloading the text or textbook to the students. And what a student is doing, a student is memorizing entire book and offloads on the answer copy. And what happens, whenever you are going to change the pattern of the examination or question items, students become fail. This is the dilemma of our education or assessment system. What IBCC has done, we are working on the model that whenever you are going to develop items for the examination, you must consider the knowledge base, you must high order thinking, you must put the questions of understanding, you must put the questions of application. This is the one thing. The other thing, when we talk about the curriculum has three parts. One is the content or knowledge, other is the skill, and third one is the values. But unfortunately, our education system has ignored the skills and values. That's why we are suffering a lot. We have not developed the education system that we need. So at this stage, I must say that we need a proactive and adaptive approach for development of the effective assessment system.
Thank you very much, sir. Dr. Banuri, would you like to add, please?
Thank you, and thank you to all the colleagues for what you said. I basically want to make 2 points. One is addressed to Mr. Mallah, and one is addressed to Mr. Coombe. Both of them are in the form of questions. Let me first start with Mr. Mallah. The focus on the input into the education system is one way of looking at it. What I would like to suggest to you is that your exams are not looking backwards, they're looking at who is going to use them. So the question for me is that at this moment, the board certification is not very useful, both when I sit in an admissions committee or when I sit in a selection board. Because one board and another board are not comparable, right? They're all very different. even more importantly, there is continuous grade inflation in the boards. So from one year to the next year, you can't compare them. This person got 60% in, 10 years ago. This person got 90%. Person A is much better than person B. You have no control over it. Number three, there is large variation. I don't know whether it is because of cheating, whether it's because of something else. So as a user of your outputs, I am very, very dissatisfied, and I would like you to fix it. And I would like from you, Mr. Chairman, to ask you, what are you going to do to fix it? In fact, the kind of things that Mr. Coombe said are relevant. Can we compare the results of one board to the other? Can you do something to fix it? Can you compare the results from one year to the other? Can you fix that? Or do you have any strategy, any plan? Number three, can you actually give me some assurance that two students who get roughly similar marks would have similar kind of skills? At this moment, it's not true. The knowledge content or the information content of your grades is very low. So there are a broad set of questions, and I would like to see what strategy do you have. It's also a question that, why is it that students prefer to sit in very expensive exams, whether it's the Oxford or the Cambridge exam, rather than to take the relatively cheaper exams, because your certification is not of much value, right? How do you raise the value of this so you begin to competing with the boards? So these are broad questions. I would also like to see the comparison with the Cambridge and the Oxford exams, okay? If somebody gets 90% here, what are they roughly equivalent to, right? So these are all the questions that you need to address. From Mr. Coombe, I think more generally I have made my point that separating skills from language, in my view, is a bit of a problem. And I basically want to know, a little bit more about the thinking that has gone into it. The great physicist Richard Feynman said that if I can't explain something to a freshman, it means I don't know it. Now, explaining something to the freshman is not only a technical skill, it's also a communication and a language skill. And the question is, if we take language out of it, do we really leave enough knowledge in there for us to be able to do this? The second thing I was thinking, I was very curious about the Oxford 3000. I went and looked at the whole thing. So Oxford 3000, ladies and gentlemen, it's an initiative. I think it's a very innovative one, and we need to look at it. They've picked up the 3,000 most used words, as it were. I mean, I'm sure Mr. Coombe will explain it. And basically, they say that all of our exams will only use these words. Now, it raises a question for me, I mean, other than the technical words. Is this enough? Well, the first question is this. In these 3,000 words, I counted about 500 words which are no longer only English words, they're also Urdu words, right? So if you think about radio and station and railway and policeman, they're not only English words, we also use them. And any uneducated person in Pakistan will know exactly what is meant by that. So we have 500, so everybody has a vocabulary of 500 to begin with, right? And even very uneducated persons have a vocabulary of about 1,000. So the question is it really taking people from 1,000 to 3,000, is that enough for us to say that, look, if you know these 3,000 words, you can be tested and we can guarantee that, you bring some skills. A related question is, if we can take them from 1,000 to 3,000, why not 5,000? Why not 10,000? Once you sort of bring it down to that level, then why are we restricting ourselves to the words which are very limited? So the main concern I have is this, that when we actually say that we will, in some sense, curtail what we test, are we giving up on excellence or on quality in the supposed service of equity? And I'm not convinced that it is also in the service of equity. So please convince me. And also I want to know a little bit more. I mean, honestly, I actually am very intrigued by this idea. I actually think that, hey, why didn't I think of this? But, I want to know more about, where you're going with this.
Sure. Thank you. Andrew, would you like to respond quickly, please? I think that what Dr. Banuri has also mentioned talks about comparison, visibility, authenticity and openness, and also students in Pakistan, now that the Oxford AQ is about to be launched September 2024, students, they would also like to see more visibility on the marking regimes and schemes. So if you would like to respond to what Dr. Banuri said, please.
I will try, certainly. So, first of all, just a point about the grade inflation and the way grades have inflated. And you're right, they have risen. There was a problem with, at the GCSE level, of too many students achieving the top grades. We used to have a system that had A star as the top grade and A. In fact, before that, A was the top grade. A star was introduced to give greater differentiation. So, and I'm talking about exams taken normally at age 16 here, so the IGCSE O-level type exams. So the UK changed the system in 2017, and we introduced a 9-point grading scale with some anchor points to ensure there was comparability. But in order to differentiate more reliably, we introduced more grades. So grade 7 is at the same standard of grade as grade A in the old system. Grade 8 is similar to A star, but there is now a new grade, grade 9, which enables the students at the top end to really demonstrate how they have performed. And it's true, an A star, a candidate who would have got an A star in the past might have been able to achieve a grade 9 or possibly a grade 8. And it's true that there will be fewer students who achieve grade 9 than grade A star. So, but we shouldn't see that as a bad thing. It's a better way of differentiating. But I also wanted to respond to get, and I think the best way I can do this is to give a couple of examples of how we use the Oxford 3000 and also the context, because we check very carefully the contexts of the assessments that we use. So the Oxford 3000 is not meant to be any kind of limitation. Most people who speak English have a working vocabulary of around 2,000 words that they use regularly. So 3,000 is already beyond that. But it's not meant to be a limit. If people can develop 4,000 or 5,000 words in their vocabulary, fantastic. We're all for that. All we're saying that we use it for really is in our assessments, we will not use words that are not in that list of 3,000 unless they are technical words which are listed in the specification. In order to ensure fairness, so that students do not come across a word which they haven't seen before and they don't know, and because of that word, they're unable to answer the question.
Sure.
I'll give you an example. There was, a few years ago, a question, I think it was in a geography exam, which talked about moss. Now, moss is something which grows in cold, wet climates. So if you live in a climate which is perhaps hot and dry, you may not know what moss is, and that was found to be the case in that particular exam. Or another example, which is to do with context. There was an exam recently which asked, it was an English exam, which asked students to write about a skiing holiday. And it was found that those students who had never been skiing were put at a disadvantage. So it was nothing to do with the subject that they were being tested on. It was to do with the context. So we're careful to avoid those contexts.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that with the limitation of time, let's open the floor for question and answer, and then we can always come back to you, sir. If you allow, let me just take a few questions. Sure.
Dr. Banuri has raised some points I have noted. The answer of these suggestions or queries is just, we don't have the assessment framework. For high-stake exams, we don't have assessment framework. That's why you can see the difference between, even in KP, we have 2 boards. The results of Peshawar board cannot be compared with the results of the DI Khan board, for instance, because we are not following the same assessment framework. We are working on it, and they have recently developed the question item bank, and this is technology based. We are introducing technology as well. But the, foreign boards, yes, they have very good assessment systems. They have very good formative assessment, or they have very good feedback system. In Pakistan, we have Aga Khan Education Board. They have very good, the feedback system, and then they have, targeted all three skills. That's why it has been, the Aga Khan Board has been invited by UNESCO to present their model with them. So we are working on it, yes.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. If we may invite questions, and if you can please say your name and please also address the esteemed panelist. Sir, please. If we can have brief, specific questions. And I would also request the esteemed panel to make.
My name is Dr. Tariq Rahman. Your basic, I think, assumption is that somebody wants equity. Well, that is not true, actually. That's not true. The system at present is meant to make the rich richer and the poor poorer. That's all over the world. That is the system for quite some time. We used to be called by different names. And what is happening is exactly what the system wants. There are some people who are going to do lift boxes and things, stuff like that, not only in the US and here, but elsewhere too. In England also. I mean, look at the people who speak, who have to write, you sir, standard RP and speaks standard RP and write British Standard English. But if you come from the countryside, etc., everyone doesn't do that. Therefore, the system is like that. Equity will not come through this, probably. Equity will come when you change the job structure. That means you don't insist upon everybody getting an MA and a PhD, etc., to get jobs. You give people jobs without it. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I think it's a fair comment. Sir, Ji.
My name is Amir Masood. I usually pride myself on understanding high concepts and ideas, but I have to admit that you guys have left me completely baffled as to what exactly you're trying to say, because the title is Fair Assessment. And right now, I haven't gotten an idea of exactly what that assessment is. What is the criteria for that assessment? Is it a question of standardized testing, which is a hotly debated issue? Is it a matter of the substance that is being taught, or the quality of the character? What are we trying to produce, first of all, from these schools? Are we just going by the Industrial Revolution definition of having a workforce for the future? Or are we talking about people who are able to sort of innovate and invent or be political or whatever? The other thing is also I'd like to get an idea of, does that assessment change between elementary education and higher education? To those things I'd like to know, before we can get into whether it's fair, what is the criteria and who are we judging ourselves against?
Interesting. Sir, anyone would like to respond to that?
Can I just
Okay, let's take a few more questions. Some diversity, please. Okay. So, the lady, okay.
Hello. My question from all of you. Sir, I have found two teachers there from England. One is from Carthage and the second one is from London. And there is a sea difference between the assessment they do and the assessment that the Pakistani teachers do. I would like to ask Sir Banuri and Sir Mallah that they have been in very good positions, what they have done so far for ensuring fair assessment, because when it comes to assessment, it's totally dependent on the teachers. So how to make the teachers do fair assessment? What have you done so far?
Thank you. Okay, it's a good question. Okay. Okay. So, Ji. Okay.
So, yeah, it's a follow-up question basically. So, I am a teacher myself and I'm teaching grade 4 ke bache. And the thing is that we recently had our midterm exams and the student gave me answers. So, for example, if we were doing a question tha and the students were supposed to make sentences. So, 5 words, 5 sentences. Usually what happens is school mein, if my class has around 50 students, those sections, 100 students, right? So, 100 students ke paper check karna is my responsibility and I'm doing that. Usually what happens is 100 बच्चों ने sentences बनाए हुए और वो एक ही तरह के sentences बनाए हुए टीम का बनाया हुआ पाकिस्तान क्रिकेट टीम इज़ द बेस्ट टीम, ठीक है. अब मैं चेक कर रही हूँ उन पेपर्स को, एंड आई नो कि हर बच्चे ने यही बनाना है, एंड देन आउट ऑफ दोज 100 एक दो बच्चे होते हैं दे मेक अनदर, मतलब किसी तरीके का और भी सेंटेंस, राइट. और फिर उसमें मैं सोच रही हूँ तो बैठ के अच्छा ठीक है, अब मैं ज़रा इनका पेपर पढ़ती हूँ, एंड आई सी कि देयर आर डिफरेंसेस, एक सब्जेक्टिव पेपर एक डिफरेंट तरीके का आ गया हुआ है. सो माई क्वेश्चन इज़ दैट हु लाइक आपके जो असेसमेंट्स चेक कर रहे हैं लोग, आर दे ट्रेन इनफ टू अंडरस्टैंड दोज डिफरेंसेस कि अच्छा अगर 100 पेपर में से 2 पेपर इस तरह के आ रहे हैं तो दे डिजर्व दोज मार्क्स, या फिर बच्चों को किन बेसिस पे मार्क्स देने चाहिए, कि असेसमेंट चेकर्स की जो ट्रेनिंग है क्या वो हो रही है या नहीं हो रही है. That's my question.
So one last question here, the gentleman in black.
Thank you very much, Sir Faisal, for the opportunity. My name is Osama. I used to be a former student of Sir Faisal. My question is to Mallah Saab and Banuri Saab. Owing to the metrics that Mr. Andrew mentioned, how can we embed those metrics in our current education systems? Because you guys
How do they what?
How can we embed those metrics in our current education boards? Because both of you happen to be the insiders. You have been there, you are in those positions, and if you could please guide us, the entire hall, of how those changes could be done, like a roadmap of sorts. And because we know that the education system is very dated, we have Mr. Chips currently still in our education boards. The problem with that is we need some reform, we all agree. Now the problem with O and A levels and IBDP is that they're extremely expensive. How can we, in Pakistan, embed some of that system in our current education boards? And if we can't do that, if you can't tell me that, at least tell me how we can make another board run by us where we could have those standards. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Chips are good people. There's nothing wrong with Mr. Chips. Okay, so Saima, if you can, from the policy point of view, you know, what people are asking is that basically they're asking the panel that, especially the policy makers, that what have we done for them? And then it comes to the practitioners. So first with you.
So I'm not a policy maker, sadly, but
You're a
I
policy influencer.
I want to address the question about fairness, and I'm talking more about, you know, basic education. In my mind, fairness is something that balances the demands of equality, basically level playing field for everyone. I mentioned, you know, children having access to certain kinds of schools, and then that leading to certain outcomes, and then equity, where you know, you really need to focus more on the ones that are the left behind. To take an example, and I'm talking entirely about our public school system here, and looking even at our current curriculum, if you look at the extent or the spread of the curriculum and the speed at which teachers are expected to cover that curriculum, that really demands a lot from teachers, from students, given the resources that exist in our public schools. So to me, that goes against the principle of fairness and equity. I think what I also mean is that, and many successful school systems across the world are doing this, teaching for mastery of basic concepts. So I'm talking about, again, basic education, fewer things in greater depth is what, you know, we are learning, even the highest performing jurisdictions.
Fewer things in greater depth. Andrew, this means that Pakistani students, they're looking for change, and maybe Oxford AQA could bring that change, and they're seeking more visibility, more flexibility, more authenticity, and more reliability, things that you said. So what would you say?
Well, I think the first thing to say is, you know, when the question is what are we assessing, I think we're in the context of an exam board and a fair assessment and making sure that we're fair. What we need to assess is what's in the specification. And we need to have very clear specification and clear assessment objectives. It's those things that you know, we can influence, we can change them over time, but we need to know what they are. So to be fair, for an assessment to be fair, they need to test on those things. I appreciate the point about the cost of exams to families and students and parents in Pakistan, and I think that is an issue. All I can say is that, you know, we're conscious of that, and we are doing our best to try to find ways of delivering the exams which will keep the costs at the most affordable levels possible. But in the end, there are, you know, the cost is associated to some extent with the quality. So we do our best on that.
Dr. Mallah, what my colleagues are trying to say, that they say that as policymakers, we are trying to teach to test and leaving behind the rest. Where is inclusivity? The people of Pakistan are looking for change.
Yes, there was a question about the fair assessment, in which we have recently decided that the question item should be based on the assessment framework, and we are ensuring it. And the other thing is the fair assessment. One is the fair question item should be the qualitative, and other is the assessment, for which we have developed the rubrics. And the other is we are working that all assessors should be certified by a testing agency. So we are also working on it. The other question was what we have done. We are de-stressing the grading system. We are working on the high order thinking, item development and teaching learning. We are working on the 2 exams per year. You know, we were conducting, in Pakistan, we were conducting 2 exams. One was the Anwer and second one was the supplementary. And this was another, stress. When a tag was, inserted on your mark sheet that I was appeared in the exam and it was supplementary, it is again stress. So we have opened it now. So we are working on reforms, fair assessment, and the reforms in the examination system, yes.
Thank you. And to conclude, Dr. Banuri, बच्चे पता क्या कहना चाह रहे हैं, if I may, Andrew, in my local language, what they're trying to say is that बस भाई बस, पर्चों का नहीं करें अब चर्चा और हुकूमतों को नहीं करना चाहिए इस पे खर्चा. अब आप बताएं सर कि क्या करें? वो कह रहे हैं कि ये बोरिंग है निज़ाम.
There are many problems with our education system. And today we are talking about exams or testing. This is not the only problem, neither it is the only solution. One has to understand what it can do and what it cannot do. My view about this, and this is where, because somebody asked me, Aapne kya kiya, what did you do? My view about this is that the testing system should focus itself on one thing and one thing only, and that is how to predict future success. So what I want people to do is, and so I set up the Education Testing Council in the HEC with a very simple mandate. I said, I'm not asking you to repeat all sorts of stupid tests that have been done in the past. What I'm asking you to do is to try to move towards a system in which you can tell me that this person is going to be successful in the future. Now, if you have to figure out what it is that this entails, whether it entails language, whether it entails technical skills, whether it entails teamwork skills, that is up to you, but this is what you need to focus on. Now, this is a problem that the education system can begin to address. Ye aapko bhi, as teachers, this is something that you need to put in mind, and it is also for us policy makers to do it. The second question is, there are many other problems, and certainly when I think about equity, I do not think that the education system is the first place I would go to. Because for the education system, I have 2 very simple requests. Number 1, give me something that contains the information that I need. And number 2, make sure that in the information that you're giving me is comparable, it's stable, it's consistent, it contains something which is, has credibility. Now, that's what I ask from you. If I wanted to address issues of equity, I have to go into other domains. I mean, I would also put to you, and this is just a polemical statement. Tariq Rahman has said this: do away with educational requirements for jobs. In HEC, I did this. I said, I don't require MPhil, MS for anything because it's a useless degree. right? It's an add-on degree. It's either an undergraduate or a PhD degree. I could have gotten rid of the undergraduate also, but I think हमारी वो जो legal requirement थी. लेकिन सवाल ये होता है कि why are we insisting on this? If you have a good person who's self-educated, can we actually get this? That's one. Second thing is, even in terms of education, should we actually give education to the brightest or the weakest? Brightest, why don't we tell the brightest people, go to Allama Iqbal, do this thing, because you're bright, you will be able to manage, and take the weakest and pull them up. Now, the thing I'm trying to say is, I'm not making this as a serious observation. The thing is that when you begin to address the equity question, you have to put on a different hat. This is not the way you're going to solve the equity question. You're going to solve one simple question, that that the education system should be able to give us information about the potential that this young man or woman brings to the table. That is the only question we ask of you. I want to look at a number and be able to say, "Acha yaar, this is a job. Is this person going to be successful in this job or not?" This is a kind of an obligation, a social obligation. Is this person going to be successful? That's what we ask from you. We don't want to ask different other things. Leave the other things to us. We are going to address them in slightly different ways.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We had such an esteemed and a diverse panel speaking about diversity and inclusion and equity. Clearly, it's always a long journey. Pakistan is work in progress. It's only 76 years old. But we must appreciate Oxford University Press for at least having such a diverse panel from policymakers to practitioners to the MD of an exam board and to the regulators. So as for the audience here, every journey takes its time, and especially having an ability to debate and have a dialogue and a discourse is clearly a beginning of a new era. So I would like to thank you for your presence and for your words, Dr. Tariq Banuri. We would like to thank you, Ms. Saima Anwer. Ma'am, thank you very much. Taliyan bajaye ji. We would like to thank you, Andrew Coombe. Thank you for your presence and for your leadership. We would like to thank you, Dr. Ghulam Ali Mallah, Honorable Chairman, IBCC. And thank you all, and thank you, Arshad Saab and the Oxford University Press for this opportunity and for having a dialogue on this important subject. Thank you.